I should have said in the middle of our speakers that if you did have questions in advance that you wanted to text through, that the number was 07918971720. But if you wanted to ask questions, we have roving mics, so please do put your hand up in the more traditional way. But equally, if you want to text, the numbers at the bottom of the screen if you didn't write it down as I read it through. Are there any questions particular? Sorry, yes, gentleman. Colleague on the right. Thank you.
It was just a question in relation to Gemma, the last speaker. You talked about making measurements, obviously, so we can benchmark and see that some of the stuff we're implementing is making a change to the business. Apart from kind of the absence rate, which shows the money and the financial implications, what other kind of metrics would you suggest that we should be measuring?
Well, engagement levels is a huge one. So any results from an employee opinion survey, levels of participation within your programs, but also how that then has sort of changed behaviour as well, is always quite useful. And any financial impacts where you may have had a return on investment or any cost savings to the organisation.
Mike, would you have anything you might want to add there? And I don't know if you might thinking perhaps about small organisations in particular. Are there things that small organisations might be able to do to evidence the benefits?
Well, no, am I switched on?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, actually, I agree. I mean, the main thing would be the sickness absence rates. The second thing is the staff survey sort of satisfaction. I think they are the key things.
And I'm handing over to Mike, this Mike Brophy, who I think has a question that's come through on the text messaging.
Well, it said, should all work stress reduction treatments be accredited or recognised? So should all work stress reduction treatments be accredited or recognised?
Shall I ask Tricia to answer?
Yeah, I think
It's interesting what the thinking behind it is. I would say yes, because you need to know that the deliverer of the system truly understands, and the word that just cropped up, which hallelujah, is an holistic approach. And when you talk about work stress reduction treatments, it's all too often people focus on what should happen when somebody gets ill. And I know, for instance, there are first aid courses and what have you. So that's one part of it. But a very important part comes way before that. And you really need to have an organisation or a group of people who have a true understanding of things like work-life balance, conflict, as well as mental health problems, as well as mental illnesses. There's a whole range. It's not something that you can mess around with. So I would say yes to that.
Did Mike or Grace want to contribute?
No, just that side. That actually, it is the preventive issues. It's having the right sort of culture in the workplace that you identify these things and where these things are happening and work to remove them at any stage. I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Were there any other questions from the floor?
They're all thinking about who to give their lollipops to.
Well, that and desperate for coffee, I'm wondering.
Tricia, what do you think that employers can do to minimise the stigma of the word mental, so that employees can actually approach? Because I think part of the problem is that when you use the word mental in everyday language,
I agree.
Just to mean something different, people don't particularly like to come forward and say, I'm part of that mental group.
No, and I
Can I just repeat the question, just in case the mic didn't pick it up? It's about what can you do to remove the stigma of the word mental?
Yeah, I think to be really honest, as an employer and somebody working on both sides of the fence, I'd say don't use the word. All the way through my show, I mean, if you have people who actually watch my show, I dealt with a hell of a lot of mental health issues. I hardly ever use the word mental health. Stress isn't okay. How are you managing? and talking about, again, with employers, when I was on an interview panel in Australia for somebody to be very senior in national mental health. And at the end of the interview, as the person was collecting their papers, we had this thing where very casually I asked, by the way, how are you doing? You know, I could ask that person about how's their own mental health. And it was extraordinary. Some people were actually insulted to be asked. I'm sorry, that's a private question, you know, that's my personal life. Some people just didn't get it. So, you know, their reaction to the word mental is exactly as you say. When you ask people how are they coping, what do they do to cope, and you talk about coping and you use other language around it, and your management can actually talk about it, it makes a difference. Just really quickly, we're going back to the States. I'm saying I'm working in the States. Somebody from England told me, when you go to the States, I was approached by several employers for these interviews, and somebody from England said, don't mention your mental health problem. For God's sake, don't do it. And I was waiting to go in for one interview, and I saw on US TV, I have problems with this, but drug companies saying, do you have depression? You know, and the whole range of, you know, do you have this, that, and the other? And I thought, flipping heck, I don't agree with all of the drug companies' approaches, but they can have ads about it here and talk about it, and even through the ad, inform people of what depression might be. So I went into this interview, and with every interview, I decided I am going to talk about having had a mental health problem. And I just use the words breakdown and, you know, and what have you. And at every single meeting, at least one, and these are the top networks in the States, every single meeting, at least one member of their management admitted either, most of them vocally at the table, I know I had a breakdown, what was it and what did you, and could talk about it at the table. These are people at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, all the big studios could talk about it. And I was really heartened by that. I'm not saying they've got fantastic workplaces, but when management can talk about their own issues, then it starts creating a culture where the employees can as well, and that's a toughie.
I think we've got another question.
Yeah, one from the screen as well. If we go to the screen then for the floor. One of the biggest barriers to change is obtaining the budgets, persuading senior managers to make budgets or time available. Do the panel have any tips for obtaining real buy-in from the top to make it happen?
Yeah, I mean, go on the NICE website and look at the NICE tools which are there for smoking physical activity. I showed you the physical activity one. All you do is you plug in the numbers of your workforce, the average costs, the average wage bills to your workforce, the absentee rate, and it basically trundles out with a number which is the saving you will make through investment in a range of different interventions. It's very powerful, it's very strong. It's about the money. I've had meetings with small businesses, with groups of small businesses, and shared it as the web address, and also shared it as hard copy. Very easy to do. I'm sure it's something that will come up later in the day anyway. Absolutely. But just plug into these things, and it's very hard to argue with them.
And you don't have to be a large employer. There are quite a few dividends for small organisations as well. Caroline.
Just a quick one. Caroline Williams from Norfolk Chamber. It's quite interesting that you said that we should use the word stress, because the big problem employers have got is the employment law. The minute someone comes down with stress, you're actually into disability. And therefore, the whole way that you deal with that employee is you can't deal with them the way that you want to as an employer, because they're counted as disability. So, for instance, you're part of red tape. So what I love the actually health and wellbeing grouping to talk to GPs and actually try to understand how damaging, interesting, the language can be when you're trying to, as an employer, to support your staff. And at the moment, the word stress is that it puts fear through every employer as soon as that word's used. So I think mentally, again, is not right, but stress is, for an employer, is just as bad.
I think it's the how are you coping, and being able to have conversations about issues that are happening in people's lives, and recognising that they may be under stress, although you may use a different word. Yes, the language has got all sorts of pitfalls, understood.
Okay. Oh, we've got one last question, and then that's lovely. Thank you.
It's one for Tricia, actually. As an employer, I very much recognise what you say about people who are very, very diligent and hardworking, put all hours in, want to do it perfect, want to do it right, don't want to complain, but they're the ones who go off with stress. as an employee, what could your employer have put in place that would have made you come forward, if at all? Because, you know, that's where I'm curious as to how an employer can help.
And that's a good one. It's often encouraging, I would say, encouraging people like I am, to take time out. And that can be difficult. But I guess looking back, there are things that if I'd been asked, for instance, to, what was I into? I was into working out and exercising. If I'd been asked to join the television team's running team or a competition or something like that, there are ways of harnessing that go, that can be diverted from the office. Just saying to people, look, go home. Often it was people saying to me, look, just get out of here, go home. And you might put up, but you actually go and you sit in your car and you think, phew. It's actually allowing those people to wear a different hat, because we all create our own persona in workplaces, and that's how we get labelled. So it's allowing somebody not to be that way, and often it is, hey, you know, in a joke, get out of here, go, no, it's okay. It's rather what happens is the people who work like that are encouraged and made an example of. Look at so-and-so, he works all weekend and he does this and that puts you on a higher and higher pedestal, keeps you running on that hamster wheel even faster, and you can't get off. Being allowed to go away, to do something else, to get involved in a different sphere of your business actually helps.
I think line managers can often, perhaps when you sit down and talk about appraisals and so on, making sure, have you taken your holiday? Are you at full entitlement on your holiday? And if you're not, you need to be. And equally, as Trisha said, that culture, if everyone sits at the computer and eats their lunch, then it's very difficult for someone to say, actually, I'm going to go and have some fresh air and a quick walk. So, and, you know, the more that line managers display that behaviour, the easier it is for staff across the board to do that. But I think taking an active interest as a if you're a line manager, or getting your line managers in the person's broad well-being, as well as their actual sort of pure work performance, if you like, is a really positive.
I think I'm probably the opposite of Trish, that I'm really idle. I really am. And I say to my staff, I don't work beyond 9 to 5. I don't work at weekends. I don't expect you to. And I think that for senior managers to stand up and say, no, working all hours, you probably got a problem with your time management there somewhere. You shouldn't be facing urgent deadlines, because actually we know things are coming up quite a way in advance usually. Things don't usually jump out in front of you. So I actually think that we need to get to a culture that moves away from, working all hours, that's great. I do not. I won't. And I don't want my staff to, and I tell them not to. And if they are, I pull them in and say, why are you working so long?
I think that's the cue to go and have a break. So please...